right, good afternoon, everyone. This is maybe the only presentation you will have seen that is not going to talk about AI. So thanks for being here. Today we're going to talk about trying to improve our own life, and that's kind of a vast subject. I hesitated quite a bit when to propose that subject, talked to quite a few people to figure out whether it would be useful. Clicked the button, and then when it was time to actually, work on it, it turns out it was quite hard. So think of it as a testimony-based way to extract good feedback, right? Good practices. So things will just gloss over you, and that's fine. You'll see that the talk is a bit dense. So things will walk over you, that's fine. Things will be really resonate for you, and that's great. And things will really eat you, and you'll be like, no, I disagree. That shouldn't be right? And then that's super interesting for you. So keep a mental note of that one and dig deeper. And of course, we're at DevOps. We're talking, professional life and so on. But this is really personal life as well as professional life. So I don't know about you, but for the longest time I had this feeling of always drowning, like there was always more things to do, didn't know what to do. So I don't know who is familiar with that sort of feeling. Yeah, quite a few hands here. So the idea is to try and figure out how to organize ourselves to not have that sort of thinking feeling, right? And another aspect is thinking about generally our own mental health and figuring out how this thing that we call brain works. And I'll finish with just a few career tips that I've had the chance to, I guess, test on people I had mentored over the time, and they never came back with an axe to kill me. So it should be not too bad. Again, I didn't have any hard youth or anything like that. So take it with your context. So who is this guy that'll tell you how to improve its life, right? Your life. So my name is Emmanuel, or the character is Emmanuel Bernard, and he fell in love with this, object when he was 10 to 12-year-old or something like that, and he really loved the idea to jump into this parallel universe and be, totally virtual in some way, and also the ability to build and control, this universe. I studied computer science, started one of the early big e-commerce websites. Well, I didn't, but participated in the creation of one of the early e-commerce sites in France. And then I started to contribute to open source at a time where Linux was getting really a thing, of course, but then middleware and open source was really at the beginning, especially for Java. So it was really the beginning of things. And I was lucky to be attached to some of the successful projects there, some of them that are still used by quite a few of you. So Hibernate was where I started, did quite a few other things. Quarkus is something a bit more recent. I'm not a manager, but I have let's call it a senior position at Red Hat, and that helped me to also explore some of the things we're going to talk about. When I started to think about this talk, I thought, okay, what is how would people perceive, based on that information, how would people perceive how happy I am, right? If it's like, oh, well, he's had a good career, got attached to lucky things and, even more lucky things. And now he's like, a big guy in a big company, probably having lots of fun. And of course, you don't know some of my personal, life, so there might be adjustments to that curve here. For example, had the classical thing, single, then in couple, then, we got married, and, we had a kid, or had a kid with somebody else, because I cannot do it by myself, of course. Where it starts to deviate a bit is that my kid had we discovered after a few years, like 2.5 years or something, like that he had an autistic syndrome. So the whole idea of like having this perfect life, very well planned, where everything will work nicely together, just transformed, right? Then the more classical thing where, one day at some point my wife said, this is no longer a thing, we have to split. And I was like just taken aback by quite a lot by that. Not funny enough. Well, funny in retrospect, but funny enough, the same week, a few days later, she go for a routine check, and essentially the cardiologist said, well, you're not leaving. You're just going to have an open heart surgery within, the next few days because this is a life-threatening situation. So that was quite a bit shock for me in my life. I'll do a spoiler to not just, kill the ambience in the room. She's still alive and healthy, and we're still together. So, just for info here. But even with that sort of information, when I tried to draw how I felt versus how the fact happened in my life, there were some variations, right? And I found that quite interesting. And to me, there are like two outcomes from that. The first one is, don't try to judge yourself based on how you think people are feeling inside, right? How you perceive their happiness, because then you're comparing something to something that is very fictitious, right? It's just fiction. When you start having accidents of life and you start to talk with close friends, then you'll realize that a lot of people have that at some point in their life. It's just nobody talks about it, especially, well, I guess not men, right? Traditionally speaking. The second point is that there was like the correlation was way less than I expected into how I think I felt inside versus how the facts should say how I feel, right? And I was like, so what's happening here? And I'll use a mental model here, and I think there are like two elements. There is what's from the outside, and let's think of them like input-output in a computer, in a system. So it could be like having a good evening with friends, having good food, falling in love, maybe the day you get married, of course, the loss of somebody you love, a divorce, a handicap, anything. So that's like big input-outputs to the system. And then there is what's inside that you can think of as firmware, right? So for me, when I started early in the open source days working on Hibernate, the notion of work-life balance, like I read articles about it, I was like, I don't understand why people need that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? And I was very rational. My brain was very rational, still is, to many aspects of really a Mr. Spock style of thinking. So everything should be very well thought out and rational as far as decisions. Yes, people have emotions. I have emotions, but that's sort of a vestige of the species that'll go away in a few years or something. And kind of a consequence of that is like, hey, I can produce things that I want to produce at a constant rate, and then if I improve my methods, I'll produce more, and things will all be good. When you think back, like, the external aspects are interesting, but all of those thinking and feeling, they come from the brain, right? From the firmware. And my brain is a great machine to invent the future or anticipate the future, and it's got a slight bias into inventing very negative futures, right? So I see the worst case scenarios, which is really awesome for my work, because then I can really anticipate bad situations and help my employer make better decisions and so on. Now, for personal life, it's useful as well, except when the scenarios are so good that you don't feel like these are scenarios, you're living them, right? You're in the movie and it's so horrible that everything's gonna die and everything, right? But these were just scenarios that did not happen for the most of the time because they are worst case scenario, even though I was feeling the pain of those scenarios. So that was interesting to me, right? Some philosophy actually think that the whole notion of suffering is only from within, from your brain, right? So I'm not sure I would go all the way to that. But when you got stronger things that happen in your life, that might be a shock that force you to try and dig deeper. And that's what we're going to do. Try to figure out the system and see this firmware and how we can change it. And hopefully you'll do it a bit more incrementally than I went it through, but and I hope they will move you a bit further. Let's start simple. The whole notion of like, hey, I can't, there's too much work, I don't know what to do, I'm just blowing a fuse, right? So we're having information job, right? So the to-do list, the ideas are really cheap and coming real fast. So the amount of stuff you want to do is massive, and it's going faster than the amount of stuff you can actually achieve, right? So you can see two aspects to it. The first one is, wait, great, that's a lot of opportunity. I can really pick what's going to be the best, and then I'll just go and execute. That's a positive view. The negative view that is how you react is like, oh my God, there's so much to do. I don't know what, I'll never be able to do it. It's going to be a disaster, and so on and so on. So think of your to-do list as essentially an infinite list, because very quickly, as you go in your career, you'll have more to do than, again, that you can, really execute. So what you need to do is to figure out what is the most important for me, what is the most impactful, or whatever is your decision making at this stage, so that, let's say, the infinite minus the 30 tasks you will do per week will not make you unhappy. You will not suffer from all of the things you're not doing and really be happy about the things you are doing. So I'm giving you two methods here. The first one is a very formal, and my brain, being very formal, really likes that methodology. It's called Getting Things Done. It's got 5 steps, and the first one is to capture everything you need to want to do. And I really use the term thing because it's amorphous, it's a blob, it's a bunch of stuff you have to do, right? You need to capture everything, like light bulb is broken, I don't know, preparing the holiday, having a speeding ticket, or, well, not wanting to have, but just having a speeding ticket. I don't know, going to the moon. All of those are things you want to do, and you need to capture everything you think you want to do. And the second step, which is step 2 and 3 really are, the step 3 really being putting it in the system. Step 2 is really processing that, like what is it that we want to do? So step 2 is really detailed on the right side of the screen. So what is it that you want to do? Like clarify the definition of done for that thing is super important. And it takes between 20 seconds and a minute, but it's super important because it clarifies the outcome you're after. In fact, when I write a to-do myself, an entry in my to-do, I really think about the outcome. So I'm a podcaster in French. I'm going to try and do a podcast around DevOps, so I need to publish the DevOps pipeline. So publish the DevOps podcast is my outcome, and then there will be tasks to associate it to it. So then we go into the detail of it. Is it actionable? Is it an action that I need to do? If yes, is it 2 minutes? If it's less than 2 minutes, essentially putting it in the system will take longer, so just do it, unless you're in the wrong context, and we'll mention that a bit later. If it's more than 2 minutes, you put it in the system, but you need to figure out, is that a single action, like, hey, writing an email to Bob? Or is it something a bit more complex, like a project? And a project could be as simple as changing a light bulb, because changing a light bulb says, I need to get the light bulb, look at the model, go to the store, come back with a new one, and then put it back up. And I'm changing context. I'm having to go to the store, and that does take time. And then after that, you decide, if you want to delegate it and do it yourself, and then you can prioritize stuff. And another aspect you can do is delegate, which is just awesome. Some people are really good at delegating, and some people are really good at being delegated into, trying to be in the right camp. But that clarification phase, it takes just a tiny bit of time. It is super critical. Then, once you've done that, you're like, hey, I'm happy. My brain is really happy. I've got everything set up, and I'm going to work. I'm doing the phase 4, which is doing. You do that, but after a few days, a week, a month, what's happening? Well, new tasks do come, new things do come. Then you actually hopefully do some of the stuff, right? So there is an update to happen here. And the priority might change because the context outside does change, right? So you need to really reflect on the list that you have on a regular basis. And for 2 reasons. Well, you keep it updated so you do exactly what is important. And the second phase is your brain needs to 100% trust this to-do system. And if you don't review it regularly, the brain is not appeased, and it will start thinking and having weird feedback loop that are unrelated to the task you're doing right now. Imagine I'm here, I'm doing the presentation, I'm like, ooh, did I buy the milk? I don't remember. What can I do right now about the milk? Thank you, brain, for reminding me about that, but I can't do anything here at DevOps unless I go to the coffee place and just steal the milk they have, but that wouldn't be too nice. So that's super important. And then, of course, you do. And when you do and you have all of that set up, you can really focus on the task that is at hand. That is a very framed system. There is a more lightweight system that is less procedural and graphical, which are 2 interesting benefits. And it's really 3 columns. I know there are 4 here because I wanted to see a counter example, but there are 3 columns: to do, doing, and done. To-do is essentially the stuff, and I really encourage you to do the clarification we discussed a bit before, so you can then order it by, priority. For example, the most important things for me is to go to the moon, but I know it will take 5 years, and I cannot go 5 years without, some holiday. Otherwise, I'll just go and burn out, right? So I'll prepare the holiday for this winter or this summer instead of, working on going to the moon, because that's, part of the bigger plan for me. The next step is doing, and it's important to visually see how much stuff you do in parallel, because any human being brain actually does not do context switching. You might be really good at keeping in your short memory several things, but you're still doing primary, secondary, focus. So try and limit the amount of parallel work in progress. And done is also super important. We're good at seeing a big mountain of stuff we have to do, and we might actually see it bigger than it is really. But done tends to be forgotten or under-evaluated. So sometimes people come and say, I haven't done anything this month. If they actually capture what they have done and look it back, they'll be, no, actually I've done quite a few things, right? So yeah, the two columns I don't like, it's really the name, this week and today. It's subtle, but it can be really disastrous. What do they say here? What they are doing is an artificial commitment with yourself. This week I'll do those 4 tasks, and today I'll do those extra 2 tasks. What if you don't do them? Well, Emmanuel, you're not as good as I thought. You're really bad actually. You cannot even do 4 tasks in a given week. So you're actually undermining yourself, subconsciously or explicitly, purely artificially, because maybe those tasks don't have a deadline. So when people put like tasks in their calendar, it's a bit of a trap, really. Okay, so do avoid artificial commitments. You can use other methods, but what I found the critical important aspect of a to-do list system is having clear priority, okay? Making sure you clarify each thing so you know what you're doing and you're a bit at peace about all of the things you're not doing, because you know what you're doing is you've decided, and that is the most important. Avoid the artificial commitments because they will let you down. And yeah, for example, if you expect to do 40 tasks per week, maybe you're optimistic, so in practice you can only do 30 tasks per week. But what's happened in reality? You got new tasks coming up, like your boss is coming with a new priority one, you maybe have a family emergency. So in practice, things will move anyway compared to what you had planned. So just stop this artificial commitment. And do the weekly review every week or whatever works for you, because the brain has to 100% trust the system. I don't know how many of you started a to-do list and you felt really happy about being in control, and just a few days or maybe a few weeks after that, you're like, this is a lot of control. I don't even know if that to-do list is actually correct. I'll create a new one just for today, and then it grows into the second one and then the third one. So you got to-dos that are deprecating to-dos and to-dos and to-dos. The key here is that you had your brain not trusting the system because you didn't review in a very systematic way. I don't like to talk about tools because they can be very specific. I know personally I do use OmniFocus because I'm on the Apple ecosystem, and what's important for me is that I can do it on my phone and capture what I have to do immediately, because I tend to forget real fast, and then of course on my computer to make things happen. If you're French, you can go to Le Cast Codeurs episode 152, and it's got lots of details about that. There is one important thing. I made a sort of mistake. Well, I made a mistake, which is you might have your objectives and you might have your metrics and your proxy for knowing whether you're reaching those objectives. And that metrics for me was like the number of to-dos I was doing. And I just went obsessed into the metric instead of taking a step back. So essentially, I forgot to live and taste the experience of life, right? Like, hey, say goodnight to your kids. Well, I don't know. It's not in my to-do. So what should I do, right? So I was really running after that and saying, oh, I need to do more. I need to do more, right? I was really chasing that number. And I ended up being very unsatisfied, right? Without really knowing where it was coming from. So we'll come back to that. So when we've done the to-do. No, let's think about the mental health and the mental shape. Just like, some of us do, go for a run to stay physically healthy. What can we do with the brain? Well, the first thing is, what you're trying to do with it. Let's say you try to maximize happiness for you, but you need to define what do you think is making you happy. So, testimony from me, I thought work was really the foundation of, how I felt fulfilled, right? So, my passion was my job, and, I was starting to have self-esteem and be rewarded for what I was doing. So it was really making a lot of sense, right? And I was trying to do as much as possible and so on. And the rest I felt were like given. And then I had, a family shock. Interestingly, it's not when I learned that my kid had this handicap that really shook me. It's when my wife said, it's over. When she was saying that, like within 1 second, all of my priorities were like clarified in just in an instant. I was like, oh, now all of that work, it's all nice and dandy to try and do more to fulfill yourself, but the real important stuff is this piece, right? So that was very helpful because that really fueled me into exploring myself way more. So I had to go through a shock, but hopefully for you, it will be more of an incremental process. And of course, I did fight, right? My firmware, the rules were, fighting back. But I'm really happy I went through, all of that. And what's interesting is that it does relate to, some theories, including the pyramid of Maslow. The pyramid of Maslow says to build up to a given layer, you need to be fulfilled enough on the layer that is above, the set of layers that are above. For example, you can survive without water for like 3 days or something like that. You cannot survive without battery for, let's say, half a day or something. No, I'm kidding. Who is really obsessed about battery lives? Well, okay, well, not too many people, but at least I'm not alone. But more seriously, it really relates to my experience. I was working on my self-esteem via work, and I was having connections. I really felt I was fulfilling my life. But when the belonging, the love layer got shattered, the self-esteem didn't exist anymore, didn't make sense, right? So that was interesting. The other one that I find interesting is the one at the top, and that's a term that was made by this person. I don't know if he's a doctor, but let's say Dr. Maslow, and that's the self-actualization. So let me give you the definition because it's not obvious what it is, and it's the full realization of one's creative, intellectual, and social potential. Realization of the creative, intellectual, and social potential. But that's only half of the definition. The other half of the definition is through internal drive. What the hell is an internal drive? And it's hard to explain, but the better questions is trying to address it by the negative. What is an external drive? Like, if I don't do that, my mom will kill me. Well, that's probably an obvious external drive. If you're chasing money or chasing, some way to show that you have power or you have some sort of status is likely an external drive. So you're living or you're motivated through the eye or the view of, or your perceived view of how people look at you, right? So how to separate the external drives from the internal drive? Well, you go talk to people, and they are like professional people that let you do that. You go to a psychologist, for example, or a psychiatrist, whatever is better for you. But I come from a family where you don't go to talk to a psychologist and then you're crazy, right? And they will actually make the problem worse or something, right? So thanks for me, like the electroshock really pushed me into deeper and go through that. And you know what? I actually quite enjoyed it, and I didn't know I could talk that much, to a person, right? So you could discuss your mood, your reaction, and you could try to figure out, okay, why did I have that reaction? Let's go through the dependencies. Why am I driven? Why is it when Bob said, hey Snake, how are you doing? It's like, why is he calling me Snake? Why is it that make me itch, right? Am I a snake? No, I'm not a snake. So I know I'm not a snake. So when he says that, he's saying something wrong. So why does that move me? Or maybe I am a snake and I don't like that he's calling me that way for one reason or another, right? So you go on and these are the firmware rules, right? I find. So do that regularly. There's one thing interesting, and I'm not sure I'll give you credits, nor that I'm super accurate about it, but there is a concept called repression, or suppression is a variation of that, which is when something really tough, happens to you in life, there is a great tool that, if it's too much for you to cope, will just find a way for your psyche to keep surviving, right? And it is a super useful function, but then it starts to create some sort of distortion fields, distortion lenses, into your view of the universe between the I/O and how you perceive things. Let's say you have a big shock, you could just forget about all of that, or you could have a distorted view of that memory and say, no, it was all of this other guy's problem, and you really made it worse, or something along those lines. Okay? The opposite of that is acceptance, really seeing things for what they are and just accepting it and, moving on, which then doesn't create those distortion lenses. And these are useful, but then after a while, you got quite a bit of distortion lenses, and they change the reality for you. Yeah, I won't go too much in details here, but the PSI, what it helps you is discover those various drives. And one thing you'll realize is that you are actually running in a lot of situations in automatic pilot. And you don't know about it. So the first step is to look at things of what happens in your life and say, well, okay, well, that was an automatic thing. Every time this happens, I'm doing that. Okay, that's interesting. So you capture that. So now you are aware that you're in autopilot. The second step is to figure out the rules of that autopilot and maybe decide to disengage into some or all of those, right? If you go at it with curiosity, it will work. It will help you, progress. So for me, the future, there was some sort of fear of the future. There still is to some extent. So it was quite funny from life to just come and say, hey, your kid happens to have a handicap. So how do you fare with that? Okay, so maybe you're like, okay, Emmanuel, all this psyche stuff is nice. What I really want is to be an athlete and really optimize my brain to do as much as possible. Let's optimize the brain performance, right? And I actually have a list. I really want to be focused and, be strong. And I thought about it a lot, Emmanuel. I even have my own OKRs to really, be efficient. And I'm like, no, stop another second. This is super important. We'll do that, and you can do that, but you also have to say, why is it that you're not happy with what you have right now? You're not going to find happiness by chasing it somehow, right? You need to figure out why you're unhappy, and then, unlock that, and then be happy, and then have a desire to do more commits and do more stuff, but not a rage or an envy to do it. So it's really hacking you on the inside. And one tool that I found that was interesting is meditation, and specifically mindfulness. And I came at meditation for a very different reason. I found that I had a lot of good attention span when I was in my studies years. And then after a while, my attention span went all the way down to the ability to read one tweet without having to think about something else, right, and being distracted. So I started to work on meditation to try and improve that, and I failed quite a few times, but mindfulness is one type of meditation that is both quite simple and also can have quite a bit of benefits. So the idea is you stay conscious of what's happening right now and not about your thoughts, future, past, or anything like that. So let's give it a try, right? So here I'm, well, I feel my heart beating. That's okay. I'm alive. That's fine. My feet are a bit warm. Yeah, maybe I should have used different shoes or something. Okay, so that's not the present. That's a scenario I'm making. So I'm coming back to what's happening right now. So I'm breathing. I wonder if I'm taking too much time right now. Okay, that's another thought. I'm projecting into the future and being late for the presentation. So these muscles, like when you out and you come back, that's exactly what it's about. So the more you fail, the more you work, the better you're doing. Okay? And after a while, you'll see that you actually don't get carried over by your thought as much as before. And that's useful because you can really, like, it takes a while, but then I can be fully present on a meeting or on a task and really not be distracted by other stuff. Like this muscle memory actually works, right? When you go one level, explore more. Remember those, distortion lenses? You can actually look at it through meditation. So you're really looking at yourself, having an emotion, reacting to something. So looking at those rules and exploring them. So you're like bypassing the firmware and looking straight, over time. Personally, and it helps you remove beliefs and all of the things. And you can decide to keep them or try to untangle them. I needed some sort of coaching for that. I find it too hard to just do it by myself, but that was a good way to progress. What's interesting is that I used to have to do something, think about something. So it was reading a book, looking on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. I don't know, thinking about like doing computation in my brain. No, I can just be there, barely have thoughts coming, and be fine with it. And it's just like I didn't know I could do that. The other advantage is that there is a bit of a distanciation between the emotions coming or the thoughts that are coming, which means when something is about to blow up, I see it and it really helps me to just, minor it by quite a bit. So frankly, it's harder for me to get mad at people, which is probably a good thing for the world in one way or another. How to do meditation? You don't have to be in a lotus position or anything like that. Just sit. I recommend guided meditation, so you'll find plenty of them on YouTube. You can use an app for that. There's a French one, Petit Bambou, but there's like Mind, Calm, all of that. Yeah, give it a try. You might fail. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's I really enjoyed. Well, I can do it every day now for a little bit, where I just couldn't maintain that, ability for the longest time. So what about careers, right? You want to be successful. Let's explore that. I think there is a few concepts we can just look at real quick to help you there. The first one is, if you want to be better at your career, what do you want to be? I'm assuming we are some sort of engineers here. So you want to be, let's say, 10x engineers. And it turns out there are like different kinds of 10x engineers. And this GIF is a very profound analogy for the first kind of DevX engineer. So let's discuss it. So you see rat number one, he bought the biggest wheel he could find to really be extremely efficient. And then he bought oil and oiled it to the best. And then he organized it to the micrometer. And he's ready and he's running as fast as possible. And he's seeing rat number two that is slowing him down. So he's like pushing me on the side. I say, I'll be more efficient just by myself. Except rat number one forgot that in real life, there is a wider system in which rat number two is there. And all of a sudden, rat number two stumbles and boom, everything blows away. So all of the optimization rat number one has done turns out to just blow apart because he forgot that he was in a bigger system. Okay? So you can be a 10x engineer by doing 10x more commits, be about volume. So that's one way, but it takes a lot of energy. 10x is hard. 100x more code than the next person. That's getting tough. The second type of 10x engineers is one that is, I guess, let's say more creative and can do 10x better ideas, which means, 10x faster to deliver something or something. That's good, requires, a bunch of efforts and so on. And the third kind of 10x engineer is, when you zoom out, you probably realize in your organization that there's a lot of people that are doing things and others doing other things. They are all their mini direction and visions. And if you step back, there's a bit of a Brownian movement where we're not quite sure everybody's moving in the same direction. So if, as an engineer, you can help people find a common view and really move in the same direction all together, you're moving mountains, and you can really go to the 10x, 100x, and maybe more, right, depending on the size of your organization. But it's a different job. It requires a lot of communication, lots of listening, lots of ways to bring clarity into the organization. And I've mentored a few people, and there's always, I've seen at some point this sort of switch or questioning, well, should I go there or should I stay another kind of 10x engineer, right? And it's fine to do either way, and it will probably evolve like 5 years later in your career. And it's always a tough one with lots of questioning, so just accept that. The other one, real quick, is you know, the Mr. Spock, constant throughput, and then you optimize the system. Just accept that it just doesn't work, right? Accept when you're like, oh no, you know, I cannot do anything, or I can do only 20%. Accept that, because it will lower the pressure and let you come back to 100%, you know, in a much more naturally, much faster way. And this is not a run; this is really a marathon. And go at it with that mindset. It's funny because, you know, I was having a conversation this week, and somebody said, you know, if only I had 2 more extra hours per day, I could do so much more, because, you know, I'm really at the limit. Those 2 extra hours would be like, you know, a lot more extra space to do X, Y, Z. But it's a fallacy, right? The only thing that is constant is probably the amount of time we have, right? That's not quite changing. Well, I don't think this sentence is exactly what I wanted to say, but time is the only thing you cannot really control. Last one, but extremely important, is, by the way, who has seen that when he was a kid, like the Care Bears? Okay, so what I discovered, because I did research, right, for that talk, including Care Bears, they have generational, so they are slightly different depending on how old you are. This is the first generation, so I'm part of the first generation of Care Bears, but you might have different ones, slightly different ones. But the important aspect, if you're good technically, and I'm assuming you're good technically because you're here trying to progress on your career at DevOps and so on, and if you're good at connecting people, making links between people, then you're golden, because you're good at 2 of the fundamental things that'll make things move, you know, in this current world. And the communication methods are really about separating fact and fictions to avoid, and listening to yourself to avoid like knee-jerk sort of reactions. So let's look at one. It's called nonviolent communications, but there is plenty of others. The fundamental is to try and talk and discuss with people in a non-judgmental way to avoid triggering the automatic pilot or anything like that. So they're like, the first one is to observe yourself. It's the phase. At the first few times you do that, it takes quite a while, but then it gets more natural and better. When you observe, you need to separate fact from emotions, from scenarios you're building, and so on. Then take a bit of time to think about your feelings, you know, what's happening, what's triggering you in that situation. And then explore the needs behind that feeling. How does that feeling come from? What feeling is not really fulfilled at the moment? And then you can talk to the person. Okay, so let's take an example. So I work on a very complex piece of code, very critical for you know, for the system, and you know, it took me hours to figure it out. And I said to the, you know, discussing the team, and said, you know, nobody touched that. This is really very unstable. So if you need to change it, just talk to me, right? A few weeks pass, and then, you know, I moved away for a bit, and I come back and I look at the Git log to just see what's going on. I see that Bob changed, you know, this particular piece of code 3 times last week. So that's fact. But then I'm panicking. The production is toast because I'm sure we're losing data right now. And Bob really just didn't listen to me, like I don't care, like I don't exist, right? And maybe I'll be just being killed by the boss for all of the mistake that's gonna happen, right? These are scenarios, fictions that you're building. So separate those 2, right? So let's come back and let's separate the judgments and think about the emotions. So, you know, I feel anger. Yes, probably. Anger is quite a big one, so we can try and zoom. So is it despair? No, it's not despair, though production is really worrying me, but frustration is probably what's happening. Okay, so my emotion is frustration. Okay. Then I look at what are the needs behind that are not fulfilling and that are creating that frustration. Is it trust, like a trust in me, like trust in others? Yeah, there's probably an aspect of that. Self-esteem? No. How about consensus, like a need for consensus? Yeah, that one seems to trigger me. Okay, and then I can talk to Bob without that method, or talk to Bob with that method. First case, Bob, you did it again. You're destroying the team trust. You're not respecting anything. Here is what you did. So what happens with Bob? So if Bob is kind of a normal human being, it will be on the very defensive at the very least when you enter that conversation. unless he's done nonviolent communication and he's trying to like come back on a more neutral aspect, but that's not everything. The other option is to say, hey, Bob, I see that you changed this piece of code 3 times, and I know you haven't talked about it to the team, or at least not to me, and we discussed that it was a critical piece of code. Let's figure it out how to find a way to avoid this problem. Then Bob doesn't feel like it's a problem about him. It's a problem about, well, you express your problem, and we try to find a solution. And that's a much more neutral way to go into the conversation. I will stop there. I've talked a lot about a lot of different things. I try to put some of them here. It's not really a progression map, but they felt a bit natural as a progression, but to take them like in the whatever way you want. But what I found more interesting here is just to stop and have you discuss. Maybe you have questions, maybe something we're resisting you want to discuss, maybe you have something you want to say to other people and share. So let's start the conversation here. I know it's tough because I did the presentation, so I know it's tough, but just don't be shy. Try and open up. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So this person is an open source maintainer. That means he's having a day job. I don't even know if that's your day job, but let's say it is your day job. So that could be worse. And then I see lots of questions, and I really sometimes feel angry about it, because probably your feeling is that, hey, this person feels he deserves an answer, and I'm just doing it for free, at least for him, and I'm just getting mad, right? I cannot divulge that secret, but we had a special phrase at JBoss for that. It happens for everybody at some point. And it's a sign that you need to probably take a bit of a step back and just relax. You don't have to be an answering machine and resolve the world's problem, right? So if that person has a problem, that's okay. He's angry, that's okay. So you really separate I think the phrase is, you're not your idea. Right, so if the person critiques, hey, the project has this problem, blah, 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 you're not that. So you look at it. So the way I try to do it, right, I look at the feedback, and I just explore, is it true? Like, how much is it true? How much is it not true? And what is true? Of course, I open an issue, and we try to figure out and improve it. When I feel that it's not true, then I'm just, politely answer and then move on, right? But it is difficult. That's a easy triggering, because we feel so embarked and passionate about the project that we just say, I am the project, therefore if you attack the project, you attack me, right? That's a sort of shortcut your brain might be doing at the moment. Another question? Another comment or remark? Can't see you very much. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, Bob, like, if he does the problem 1 time, okay. But what if he does it 2 times, 3 times, 5 times? Enough that there is no mistake, that somehow, I was about to say somehow he's not listening. But here I'm already putting some sort of story here. What is for sure is that for some reason, Bob cannot follow that rule. I don't know why, right? It might be that he's not listening, or he's explicitly having a reason for not following it. And it might be a good reason that he's not able to express, or he's not decided to express, or he might not even know about it consciously, or it could be for bad reasons. So one step before going ballistic would be to just try and, when you go for the nonviolent communication, what's happening is, another method actually is like that. Here is the facts, and you say literally, hey, I'm making that scenario that somehow you're doing it just to make me crazy and just have high blood pressure or something. And then maybe you laugh about it, but you say, what's going on? What was the reasons, right? You really try to dig with the person to understand what's going on, right? But and then you have more facts, and you might make the decision with the manager and whoever to say, it's not working, so maybe we just need to be in two different teams, or that person needs to move on. But you can do it in a quite dispassionate way versus feeling triggered by the fact that he's repeatedly making failures. So it's not solving the problem. It's more like solving the way you see the problem, or the situations rather. Yeah, we got some more time. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to summarize. So for software engineers, we usually have a busy life just on the work side, and then when you have kids, you have another busy life, and you try to make these two lives into one life. And it's tough because when you what can arise is some sort of culpability, as in like, oh, I'm spending more work and I probably should spend more time with my kids because they need time. But when kids are small, yeah, the attention span that they have and they want to move forward. So you might use the fact that they move away for some reason to just keep working, right? And you're not comfortable with that situation at the moment. Um, I, I had that same problem a bit differently, but I was really fighting, like, I need to be with them, but then I also had this urge to do more things. But by unlocking the whole I need to do more, I was able to be in a more central position to decide, whether I would spend time with the kid or with my work, I guess. The worst that I did was like saying, I'm here, but your wife is like, you're not here, right? So what is it being here? It's not the physical aspect, it's the central aspect, like being present, just like in the meditation, you're here or you're not, right? And I know a funny story, I don't know, but my wife is like, could tell me like 5 days before I could even express it, like, you're in a bad mood, something is brewing in you for some reason. And when she would say it too early, I was like, no, I'm not, I'm fine, I'm fine, sort of situation. And then after a while, you're like, actually, you were right, and here's what I'm not fine about. But it took me days, to figure that out. Noah can do it much faster. She can see it faster than I can process, but it's progress. Um, so I don't have a solution to your point. Two things though is quality is way more important than quantity with anybody, but with kids for sure. So be there when you're there, and when you're not there, you're not there, right? And I think they do understand that. What they would feel more is the emotional state when you're not present, right? Like, hey, daddy, stop with the phone, right? That's probably the smarter things that kids tend to say these days. Any other thing that the other stuff is like we're all human, so when you do things with love, essentially there is no wrong answer. You've done at some point. I had like during all of that process, I had conversations with my parents, and one thing that my dad said is like, we did our best. And for me, it was like it was the liberating moment for, a few things for me. I was like, he's right. He just tried his best within the framework that he had, right? And, it took me 35, 38 years to just be at peace with that. But he literally did his best with whatever limitation he has as a human being. So accept that as well. Just let go, I guess. Yeah. Well, 15 seconds, so let's stop right there. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll stay around, and if you want to have more conversations, I'm happy to exchange. Thank you.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis